They said these meals were forgotten for a reason, but what if forgetting cost us comfort, stories, and the one-pot miracles that fed whole families? Hey there, welcome to the America Lost Recipes. If you're new here, a small request, please hit the subscribe button, and thank you to all the returning viewers. Tonight we're unearthing 25 cheap 1970s family dishes that vanished from dinner tables but carried recipes for survival, Sunday hugs, and kitchen secrets. You'll hear the sizzle, the hush of a late-night pantry raid, and the simple tricks that turned scraps into staples when money ran out. Tell me your favorite 70s comfort food. Where are you watching from? Drop suggestions in the comments. I read every note with love and I'll reply. As we move to number 1, listen carefully, because what you may believe is a mystery is actually reality. The tuna noodle casserole is not some trendy throwback. It is the purest example of how thrift turned into comfort. After World War II, 3 pantry inventions, canned tuna, affordable egg noodles, and condensed cream soup, collided and made a one-dish meal that could feed a family for next to nothing. Mothers, working fathers, college kids, and church kitchens loved it because it stretched protein, hid picky eater vegetables, and baked into a warm, chewing comfort that looked like care on a plate. In the 1970s it was everywhere: school cafeterias, church potlucks, and family dinner tables. A university food study even traces the casserole back through wartime rationing to earlier one-pot traditions, showing how necessity shaped taste and ritual. My neighbor Clara used to tell a small, quiet story. During a month when pay was late, her mother mixed 2 cans of tuna with noodles and a suspiciously thin white sauce, topped it with crushed potato chips, and called everyone to the table like it was a feast. They all ate twice. That memory is the point. This dish is not about glamour. It is about how a family kept its humanness when budgets were tight. As we move to number 2, listen carefully. Creamed chipped beef on toast is a dish that reads like a kitchen fable. Thin, salty slices of preserved beef folded into a simple white gravy, ladled over toasted bread until steam and salt make everything feel like home. Its story begins not in a fancy restaurant but in army mess halls. Recipes for stewed chipped beef appear in early military manuals, and the dish was widely served to troops because it was cheap, shelf-stable, and quick to scale for dozens of men at once. Over decades, the recipe migrated back into civilian life. Housewives, young families, and campus diners adopted the gravy as a weekday staple, and by the 1970s it was a Midwestern and Southern comfort across church dinners and blue-collar tables. Chipped beef itself is simply dried, salted beef sliced paper-thin. When simmered gently with a butter, flour roux, and milk, it becomes an unpretentious sauce that stretches into many servings. I remember Mrs. Harlan from down the street. She would rinse the chipped beef once to soften the salt, add a handful of peas for children who needed coaxing, and call the family to the table like it was Sunday. They would eat and trade small, private jokes about army nicknames and knickknacks, and the meal was always spoken of like a quiet rescue during hard months. If your grandparents ever made this, what memory does it open for you? Where are you watching from? Share below. I read every comment with care and will reply. Listen carefully about this recipe because this one is a bit unique. American goulash is the kind of meal that reads like thrift made tender, elbow macaroni or small pasta folded into a saucy sling of ground beef, canned tomatoes, and a little onion, then simmered until the whole pot smells like Sunday even on a Tuesday. This dish is not an immigrant copy. It is a domestic remix, borrowing Italian ingredients, folding in Depression-era thrift, and becoming a blueprint for cheap, large-batch feeding in mid-century America. By the 1970s it belonged to lunchrooms, church suppers, and weeknight tables because a single pound of meat could feed a family when mixed with pasta and tomatoes, a practical truth often recorded in home economics pamphlets and community cookbooks. A well-known household brand even published Skillet versions that turned the recipe into a quick, stovetop ritual for busy parents and college students alike. I recall a small neighborhood memory. During a winter when work slowed, a mother made a giant pot, added a handful of frozen corn to please the children, and invited 2 shy neighbors in for a bowl. They left with warmed hands and stories about how leftovers tasted better the next day. That is the point. Goulash is not about glamour. It is about how stretching a few honest ingredients kept families whole. Meatloaf looks like a humble slab, yet it is a recipe archive of thrift, creativity, and household strategy. Ground meat bound with crumbs, seasoned with onion and a hopeful splash of ketchup, then baked until the house smells like safety. By the 1970s, meatloaf was everywhere because it stretched protein, used stale bread, and accepted any odd vegetable tucked into the mix. Home economics classes and community cookbooks taught dozens of versions, each one a practical lesson in feeding many with little. Commercial mixes and convenience marketing in the later 20th century only amplified the trend, making loaf-style dinners easier for busy parents and cash-strapped students alike. Mrs. Alvarez down the street would always add a secret cup of soaked crackers and a dusting of Worcestershire sauce. When money ran thin, she would slice the loaf thin, layer it between buttered toast, and call it a sandwich party. The neighbors brought coleslaw and instant potato, and for 1 hour every mouth was full and the worry was quiet. As we move to number 5, listen carefully. This one is comfort turned economical. Hamburger gravy is a simple, unshowy sauce made by browning ground beef with onion, thickening the pan juices with flour, and finishing with milk or stock until the sauce becomes spoonable. Served over mashed potatoes, it becomes a plate-sized consolation that fed children and families on the cheap. Schoolhouse and cafeteria versions added beef bouillon, Worcestershire, or steak sauce to deepen flavor while keeping costs low, which made the dish a lunchroom staple and a weeknight fallback for busy parents. The deeper story is practical. Ground beef emerged in American kitchens as an economical protein that could be stretched with starch, dairy, or vegetables, a pattern recorded across home economics curricula and community cookbooks of the mid-20th century. Home economics guides taught cooks how to turn a pound of meat into a family meal with technique rather than expense, and hamburger gravy is a textbook example of that skill. If you want a truly 1970s cafeteria vibe, brown the beef without draining all the fat, flavor lives there. Build a roux in the same pan, then whisk milk in slowly until the gravy coats a spoon. Serve with buttered mashed potatoes and a simple vegetable on the side to replicate the cheap but comforting plate that many grew up with. Sloppy joes are the perfect example of comfort that doubled as economy. Browned ground beef slowly simmered in a tangy, tomato-forward sauce and spooned into soft buns until the edges drip, messy to eat, honest to the last bite, and cheap to make for a crowd. The sandwich existed in many regional guises long before it became a canned sauce phenomenon. Print mentions appear as early as the 1940s, but mass commercialization changed the game. In 1969, a branded canned sauce called Manwich brought a ready-made shortcut to millions of households, and that convenience helped cement the sandwich as a 1970s weeknight and cafeteria staple when families wanted fast, filling dinners without fuss. What made sloppy joes indispensable was technique over expense. A little browning, a pinch of sugar to balance acidity, and a simmer long enough to soften onions and melt flavors together. A pound of meat could become several generous sandwiches. Schools and diners embraced the recipe because it scaled easily and satisfied hungry crowds, which is why the sandwich still echoes in memory whenever someone says, "Cafeteria comfort." Where are you watching from, and did your school ever serve this sloppy staple? Tell me below. I read every comment with care and will reply. Number 7. The Tater-Tot hot dish is the kind of cheap miracle that wears a crunchy crown. Browned ground beef folded with a creamy condensed soup sauce, mixed vegetables or beans, then crowned with a grid of frozen tater tots that bake into golden armor, humble, filling, and made to feed a room of people without drama. This casserole is not an accident of taste but the result of mid-century convenience tech. Condensed cream soups after 1934 and Ore-Ida tater-tot innovation in the 1950s gave home cooks the exact ingredients they needed to feed many with little effort, and by the 1960s and 1970s the dish had become a potluck and church supper staple across the upper Midwest. What keeps Hotdish alive is its practical generosity. It can be stretched, seasoned, and disguised to suit any budget, and it travels to reunions, school fundraisers, and late-night kitchens with equal ease. For many families it was the reliable dinner when work was long and pay was low, affordable, warm, and a plate that meant you were not alone. Chipped beef on toast, often called sauce in military halls, became a quiet household hero during the 1970s for one simple reason. It turned almost nothing into something warm, salty, and comforting. Thin shreds of dried beef simmered in a creamy white gravy and poured over buttered toast created a meal that tasted far more satisfying than its price suggested. Dried beef was shelf-stable, cheap, and widely available, which made it perfect for families navigating tight grocery budgets. Home economics guides of the mid-20th century often referenced this dish as a model of practical cooking. Inexpensive ingredients, minimal tools, and the ability to scale for large families. In many community cookbooks, chipped beef on toast appeared right beside frugal casseroles and pantry-based soups because it fit the era's priorities: speed, thrift, and reliability. The creamy gravy mellowed the saltiness of the dried meat, creating a balance that became strangely addictive for many households. It appeared in school cafeterias, small diners, and even on late-night supper tables when a paycheck had to stretch further than expected. Oxed macaroni and cheese is the inexpensive, instant comfort that threaded its way through Depression kitchens, wartime pantries, dorm rooms, and 1970s weeknight tables. Introduced by Kraft in the 1930s as an affordable, shelf-stable pairing of dried macaroni and powdered cheese, the product promised a family dinner in minutes for pennies. A promise that stuck as rationing, labor changes, and busy modern life made convenience essential. By the 1970s, the blue box had become shorthand for a quick, filling meal that parents, students, and single workers turned to when time and money were both tight. Cooks stretched it with hot dogs, frozen peas, or a scoop of cottage cheese to make a larger plate. The real story is practical. Powdered cheese and dried pasta made a long-lasting staple that required almost no skill, and that accessibility made the dish part memory and part survival. Did your family ever doctor the blue box with extra ingredients? Hot water cornbread was a defining staple for low-income families across the American South, especially during the 1930s and 1940s when budgets were tight and ingredients were limited. This dish required only cornmeal, boiling water, a pinch of salt, and a little fat for frying, making it one of the most dependable and affordable foods of the era. What made it special was its simplicity. Families could stretch a small amount of cornmeal into enough patties to feed a full table, and the frying process created a crisp exterior with a tender, steamy center. During harsh periods, this bread often replaced store-bought loaves and acted as the base for entire meals. People paired it with beans, stews, collard greens, or even sorghum syrup when sweetness was needed. In agricultural communities, the cornmeal often came from local mills, which kept costs even lower. The method itself was efficient. There was no need for baking, yeast, or long preparation. Once the water was mixed in, the dough was shaped and fried within minutes. Hot water cornbread became a steady companion in households that relied on low-cost, high-satisfaction meals, and it remained a cherished comfort food long after its survival role ended. Navy bean soup was one of the most dependable, low-cost meals that helped American families stay full during the 1970s, especially in households that prioritized stretching every ingredient. The foundation of the dish came from small white beans that were inexpensive, nutritious, and able to store for long periods without refrigeration. When simmered slowly, these beans broke down into a creamy, comforting broth that tasted richer than its simple ingredient list suggested. Many families added leftover ham bones if they had them, but even without meat, the dish delivered a satisfying and balanced meal. The slow cooking process required little supervision, allowing families to prepare it in the morning and return to a ready dinner hours later. According to historical food studies from Midwestern agricultural research, navy beans remained one of the most economical protein sources well into the late 20th century. This affordability aligned perfectly with the challenges many families faced during rising food prices in the 1970s. A pot of navy bean soup could feed multiple people for pennies, making it a weekly staple in countless homes. The flavor deepened each time it was reheated, turning leftovers into an even more comforting bowl the next day. Breaded pork chops became a budget-friendly favorite for many families in the 1970s because they combined affordability, convenience, and a comforting, home-cooked flavor. Pork was often cheaper than beef during this decade due to shifts in livestock production, making it a practical choice for families trying to stretch their grocery money. The method was simple. Thin pork chops were dipped in beaten eggs or milk, coated with seasoned breadcrumbs or crushed crackers, and pan-fried until golden. This approach added crispness, locked in moisture, and transformed an inexpensive cut of meat into a satisfying dinner. Many households seasoned the crumbs with paprika, pepper, or dried herbs, ingredients that were commonly available and fit within tight budgets. According to food research archives from Midwestern universities, pork consumption rose steadily during the late 20th century because it offered a balance between cost and flavor. Breaded pork chops fit perfectly into that trend, delivering a reliable source of protein without demanding complex preparation. The dish paired well with mashed potatoes, canned vegetables, or simple salads, creating a full plate that looked and felt generous even when resources were limited. Its simplicity and hearty taste kept it in regular rotation across American kitchens. Corned beef hash earned its place as one of the most practical low-budget meals of the 1970s, especially for households that relied on canned goods to keep food costs predictable. The dish used affordable canned corned beef mixed with diced potatoes and onions, all fried together until crisp around the edges. Its popularity came from convenience. Canned corned beef had a long shelf life and required no refrigeration, which made it dependable during periods when grocery runs were limited. Potatoes, one of the most economical staples in American kitchens, helped stretch the meat into a filling, protein-rich skillet meal. According to food cost studies archived in the University of Minnesota's agricultural collections, canned meats maintained steady demand throughout the 1970s because they were cheaper than fresh cuts and could create full meals with minimal effort. Corned beef hash aligned perfectly with these needs. It cooked quickly, worked for breakfast or dinner, and delivered a satisfying flavor with only a handful of ingredients. A single can could feed multiple people when paired with potatoes, turning it into one of the most resource-efficient dishes of the decade. The crisp texture, salty flavor, and comforting warmth kept it in regular rotation across many American households. American goulash became a defining budget staple during the 1970s because it relied on the most affordable ingredients of the decade: ground beef, elbow macaroni, canned tomatoes, and simple pantry spices. Households appreciated how this dish transformed minimal components into a hearty, steaming pot that fed multiple people without straining the grocery budget. The macaroni played the key role, expanding in size as it cooked and creating a filling base that required very little meat, which was especially helpful during years when beef prices fluctuated sharply. Many families seasoned it with paprika, garlic powder, bay leaves, or dried oregano, all of which were inexpensive and widely available in supermarkets of the era. Agricultural and food economy reports from land-grant universities show that pasta-based skillet meals surged in popularity throughout the 1970s because they were efficient, quick, and comforting. American goulash fit perfectly into this trend by offering a one-pot solution that minimized cleanup while maximizing flavor. The tomato base provided acidity and richness, the beef contributed depth, and the pasta made each serving substantial. This combination helped families manage rising food costs while still enjoying a meal that felt generous, warm, and deeply satisfying at the end of the day. Egg drop soup, in its simple American home version, became a quiet lifesaver for many families during the 1970s because it transformed a few basic ingredients into a warm, nourishing bowl in minutes. The core components were eggs, broth, a little starch for thickening, and sometimes green onions or pepper for flavor. Its affordability came from the fact that eggs remained one of the most economical sources of protein during the decade, documented in multiple agricultural price reports from Midwestern universities. Families often relied on canned or bouillon-based broths, which were inexpensive and stored well, making the soup easy to prepare even when kitchens were low on supplies. This dish offered a balance of warmth and lightness, making it suitable for quick lunches, late-night meals, or days when budgets were tight and energy was low. The signature ribbons of egg formed instantly when poured into hot broth, creating a texture that felt comforting without requiring complex techniques. Many home cooks stretched it further by adding leftover vegetables or rice when available, but even the basic form delivered satisfying nutrition. Its speed, simplicity, and low cost kept it in steady rotation throughout the decade, especially in households that valued frugal, no-waste cooking. Vegetable soup with barley was a cornerstone of economical American cooking in the 1970s, offering families a hearty, nutritious, and extremely budget-friendly meal. The foundation of the soup consisted of inexpensive seasonal vegetables, carrots, onions, celery, and potatoes, combined with barley, a low-cost grain that added texture, fiber, and filling bulk. Barley expanded during cooking, allowing a small amount to feed a larger number of people, making the dish ideal for families seeking to stretch groceries. Recipes from mid-20th century home economics archives emphasized this combination for both nutrition and affordability, particularly during times when meat was costly or rationed. The broth was typically made from water with a bouillon cube or leftover stock, further reducing the cost while maintaining flavor. This soup was flexible, any vegetables on hand could be added, and a handful of beans could increase protein content without increasing expense. Cooking it slowly enhanced flavor and created a warm, comforting meal that was satisfying even with minimal ingredients. Vegetable soup with barley became a reliable weekday dinner in households across America, symbolizing practicality, economy, and the simple pleasure of a home-cooked meal that was both filling and wholesome. Slaw Dogs became a surprisingly popular and economical meal in the 1970s, particularly in the southern and Midwestern United States, combining inexpensive hot dogs with the affordable crunch of coleslaw. The concept was simple: grill or boil a standard hot dog, place it in a bun, and top it with a vinegar-based or creamy coleslaw. This addition transformed a basic sausage into a full meal by adding volume, texture, and flavor without increasing cost significantly. Cabbage, the main ingredient in slaw, was cheap, widely available, and stored well in most pantries, making it a practical choice for families on tight budgets. Slaw dogs were versatile. They could be served at home, at local fairs, or in small diners, creating a portable and satisfying option for quick meals. According to historical food studies, street foods and home variations of these sandwiches became staples for households looking to feed multiple children or guests affordably. The combination of a soft bun, savory sausage, and tangy cabbage created a balance of taste and nutrition, while keeping preparation simple. Slaw dogs reflected an era in which American families valued inexpensive ingredients that could produce maximum satisfaction and minimal waste. Pinto beans and cornbread formed one of the most reliable and low-cost meals for American families during the 1970s, especially in rural southern and Midwestern households. Pinto beans were inexpensive, stored well, and provided a strong source of protein and fiber, making them a dependable choice when budgets were stretched thin. When simmered slowly with onions, salt, and pepper, the beans developed a rich, savory broth that tasted far more satisfying than its simple ingredients suggested. Cornbread, cooked in a cast-iron skillet with just cornmeal, baking powder, milk, and a small amount of fat, served as the perfect companion. Together, the combination created a complete, filling meal that could feed a family for pennies. Historical food economy reports from universities such as Texas A&M highlight pinto beans as one of the most cost-efficient staples consumed throughout the mid-20th century, particularly in agricultural communities. The meal also allowed flexibility. Families could add small amounts of ham, bacon drippings, or leftover vegetables when available, but the dish stood strong even without additions. Pinto beans and cornbread remained a weekly tradition because of its simplicity, warmth, and ability to stretch across multiple meals, reflecting the frugal cooking habits of the decade. Fish stick casserole became a go-to budget meal for many American families during the 1970s, blending convenience foods with simple pantry staples to create a filling dinner with minimal effort. Frozen fish sticks were inexpensive and widely available due to the expansion of the frozen food industry during this decade. Food manufacturers promoted them as a protein-rich option that cooked quickly, making them especially appealing to working parents. The casserole version often combined fish sticks with creamed soups, potatoes, or mixed vegetables, then baked everything together until tender and bubbly. According to food marketing archives from the University of Wisconsin, casseroles surged in popularity during this era because they reduced prep time and allowed families to stretch a small amount of protein across multiple servings. Fish stick casserole reflected this trend perfectly. The dish delivered warmth and comfort while keeping overall costs extremely low. It also required very little culinary skill, allowing even inexperienced cooks to prepare a satisfying meal. Leftovers reheated well, making it a practical option for families needing meals that lasted for more than one night. This casserole stood as an example of how Americans combined affordability and convenience during a decade shaped by rising food prices and busy household routines. The fried Bologna sandwich became a popular budget-friendly staple in the 1970s because it turned an inexpensive deli meat into a warm, satisfying meal with almost no preparation time. Bologna was widely accessible, highly affordable, and had a long refrigerator life, which made it a dependable choice for families working within tight grocery budgets. When fried in a skillet, the slices curled and crisped at the edges, developing a deeper flavor that made the sandwich feel more substantial than its cost suggested. Served on simple white bread with mustard, mayonnaise, or a slice of cheese, it created a filling lunch that required only a handful of ingredients. According to food consumption reports from land-grant universities, processed meats like Bologna remained among the most purchased items during the 1970s due to their low price and familiarity. This sandwich fit perfectly into that trend, providing comfort and speed on busy school mornings or workdays. Many households relied on it because it could be made instantly and customized based on what condiments were available. The fried Bologna sandwich remains a nostalgic reminder of how American families combined practicality, thriftiness, and creativity during a decade shaped by economic challenges. Bean and cheese burritos became one of the most economical and filling meals for American families in the 1970s, especially as Mexican-American cuisine spread into mainstream grocery stores and home kitchens. The foundation of the dish was simple: refried beans, shredded cheese, and flour tortillas. These ingredients were inexpensive, widely available, and capable of feeding multiple people with minimal cost. Refried beans, especially canned versions, provided a strong source of protein and fiber while staying shelf-stable for long periods. Flour tortillas, which became more common in supermarkets due to expanding food distribution networks, were cheap and versatile. According to historical food marketing studies from the University of Arizona, bean-based meals were heavily promoted during this era because they stretched budgets and reduced dependence on high-cost meats. Preparing the burritos did not require advanced cooking skills. Warming the beans, assembling the filling, and folding the tortilla created a warm, satisfying meal within minutes. Cheese added richness, turning the dish into something that felt comforting despite its simplicity. Families often relied on this meal for quick lunches, busy evenings, or end-of-week dinners when groceries were running low. Bean and cheese burritos reflected practicality, affordability, and growing cultural influence during the changing food landscape of the 1970s. The peanut butter and honey sandwich earned its place as a dependable, low-cost meal throughout the 1970s because it relied on pantry staples that were inexpensive, long-lasting, and nourishing. Peanut butter provided protein, healthy fats, and calories at a fraction of the cost of meat, making it one of the most economical food items in American households. Honey added sweetness and moisture without requiring refrigeration, and white or whole wheat bread completed the combination. According to food cost analyses from agricultural departments at Midwestern universities, peanut butter remained one of the most cost-efficient sources of nutrition during the decade, especially during times of rising meat prices. Families often turned to this sandwich for school lunches, quick breakfasts, or emergency meals when groceries were running low. It required no cooking, which made it especially convenient for busy households or for children learning to prepare simple meals independently. The flavor balance of creamy peanut butter and warm, floral honey created a comforting bite that felt more indulgent than its modest ingredients suggested. The peanut butter and honey sandwich became a symbol of practicality and reliability, offering sustained energy and comfort during a decade marked by economic challenges and shifting food habits. Skillet potatoes and onions became a defining cheap comfort dish in the 1970s because it transformed two of the most affordable ingredients of the decade into a hearty and satisfying meal. Potatoes were widely recognized as one of the most cost-effective staples in American households, supported by agricultural studies from land-grant universities that highlighted their reliability during periods of rising food prices. When sliced and pan-fried with onions, a small amount of oil, and basic seasonings like salt and pepper, they created a crisp yet tender dish that could stand alone as a meal or serve as a filling side. Families favored this recipe because it required minimal planning, used ingredients that were almost always available, and cooked quickly in a single pan. The onions added aroma and sweetness, enhancing the flavor without increasing cost. Many households paired this dish with eggs, beans, or leftover meats when available, but it remained satisfying even on its own. Skillet potatoes and onions became a regular part of weeknight dinners, weekend breakfasts, and late-night meals, representing the practicality and creativity that defined frugal American cooking. Its simplicity and affordability allowed it to remain a familiar comfort food throughout the decade. Tuna patties emerged as a dependable budget meal in the 1970s because canned tuna was inexpensive, protein-rich, and one of the most accessible pantry staples across American households. Mixing canned tuna with breadcrumbs, eggs, onions, and basic seasonings created a mixture that could be shaped into patties and pan-fried in just minutes. According to historical food economy records from universities such as Oregon State and Washington State, canned fish played a major role in helping families maintain protein intake during periods of high meat prices. Tuna patties fit perfectly into this pattern by offering a filling meal that stretched a single inexpensive can into multiple servings. They cooked quickly, required minimal ingredients, and paired well with simple sides such as potatoes, rice, or canned vegetables. The patties developed a crisp exterior while remaining tender inside, creating a satisfying texture without relying on costly ingredients. Families often served them with a squeeze of lemon, a dollop of mayonnaise, or no garnish at all, depending on what was available in the kitchen. This dish became a staple of frugal home cooking, representing both practicality and creativity during a decade shaped by economic challenges and shifting food habits. Thank you for spending this time with me and exploring these forgotten meals of our past. If today's journey brought back memories or taught you something new, then do not leave without joining our family here at America's Lost Recipes. Your support helps keep these stories alive. So please subscribe, drop a like, and share your favorite meal from this list in the comments. I read every message with love, and your words inspire the next videos. Until then, keep the history simmering in your kitchen and your heart.